Wants them to know they are survivors, but they do need help, especially because we're looking at potentially triple-digit temperatures this week on top of all the flooding, no power, no water.
But let me tell you something, Kentuckians have a resilient spirit. CNN's Diane Gallagher, thank you so much.
Yep.
And thank you very much for watching. I'm Pamela Brown in for Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now.
Out front next, Pelosi in Taiwan. And tonight, Beijing responds. Chinese fighter jets and warships now circling Taiwan. And America's ambassador to China summoned by his Chinese counterpart. Plus, AlZawahri's hideout. New images tonight of the house where the al-Qaeda leader was taken out by a drone strike. We are learning new details tonight about the attack. And it is election night in America. Voters casting ballots tonight in 5 key states. Our John King is standing by at the wall to break down what you can expect. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, on edge. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is in Taipei, and China is lashing out. Nearly 24 Chinese warplanes crossing into Taiwan's air defense zone. That's according to Taiwan's defense ministry. It's just after 7 a.m. local time in Taipei as I'm speaking. Speaker Pelosi is getting ready to meet with Taiwan's president and to visit Taiwan's parliament in just these next hours. And as we await those meetings and wait to see the speaker emerge from her hotel in Taipei, Chinese President Xi has placed China's massive military on high alert and launched military exercises around Taiwan. The red boxes that I'm going to pop up here right now, you can see them. Each indicate a place where Chinese exercises are now taking place. And tonight, the Biden administration is warning China.
There's no reason, as I said yesterday, for Beijing to turn this visit, which is consistent with longstanding U.S. policy, into some sort of crisis, or use it as a pretext to increase aggressiveness and military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait, now or beyond her travel.
Now, the Biden team has been struggling to separate Biden from Pelosi. For days, the administration has repeatedly said that Pelosi is there as a member of Congress, not as a member of the Biden administration. But according to U.S. officials, that is clearly not how China views today's visit. Today, Beijing requesting a meeting with America's ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, and accusing Pelosi of, quote, deliberately provoking and playing with fire against people's will. And as for Pelosi, she's not dialing anything back, being loud and clear that she's all in here. In her support for Taiwan's independence, she writes in an op-ed today, quote, in the face of the Chinese Communist Party's accelerating aggression, our congressional delegation's visit should be seen as an unequivocal statement that America stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom. Will Ripley is out front in Taipei.
A resounding show of American support for Taiwan in the face of escalating threats from China.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi landing in Taiwan Tuesday, a display of defiance, ignoring days of perilous warnings from China.
Minutes after Pelosi's arrival, China announced a series of targeted military operations in response to the House Speaker's visit. State media publishing a map of the drills, which began during the overnight hours, some just miles from the Taiwanese coast. As Pelosi's convoy arrived at her Taipei hotel, a heavy police presence. 2 groups of protesters gathered outside. Some welcomed Pelosi's support for Taiwan.
Speaker of House is Nancy Pelosi has been supporting Taiwan for decades, and it's very important for me as a Taiwanese to be here tonight to welcome her.
Others accuse her of escalating tensions.
Right now, Pelosi and the United States are treating Taiwan as a chess piece. Once she lands in Taiwan, mainland China will retaliate using their own methods.
China's foreign ministry spokesman calling Pelosi's stop in Taiwan a serious violation of the One China principle that will have a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations. Taiwan says cyber attacks knocked some government websites offline. No immediate claims of responsibility.
Beijing calls Taiwan a breakaway province of China. The mainland communist rulers have never controlled the island of almost 24 million people. They refuse to recognize Taiwan's democratically elected government. Taiwan says China sent more than 20 warplanes into the island's air defense zone Tuesday, part of what Taiwan calls an ongoing campaign of bullying by Beijing, using its massive military and economic power to isolate the island. In a Washington Post op-ed published shortly after her arrival in Taipei, Pelosi writes, "In the face of the Chinese Communist Party's accelerating aggression, our congressional delegation's visit should be seen as an unequivocal statement that America stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom." That sentiment echoed by other U.S. officials Tuesday.
So for China to try to turn what is in the historical norm into a crisis, or to try to use it as a pretext for aggressive action around Taiwan, that's on them, and they would be the ones who'd be escalating.
And Will is in Taipei. Obviously, Will, where you are, you're ahead here. So it's 7 o'clock in the morning. The Speaker Pelosi is there and about to start her day. So what do we expect to see in Taipei? I mean, exactly how is this going to be choreographed? And in these next hours, what could China do?
Yeah, well, we know that these Chinese military drills are happening off the Taiwanese coast. They started, according to Chinese state media, overnight. In fact, not just state media, but the Defense Ministry, the People's Liberation Army announced that these are happening. And they even put out a map showing that some of them are coming literally within miles of the Chinese coast. So theoretically, if they're loud enough, people in Taiwan on the shoreline might be able to hear China conducting military exercises around the entire island. Clearly, it's an act of intimidation. But from Speaker Pelosi's perspective, we expect to see them go on through the day as planned. So we now have confirmed that at 10:30 local time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, she'll be meeting with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen. Before that, we're expecting her to meet with members of Parliament and talk to them about their system here. You know, she's been a real champion for democracy here in Taiwan, which is very young, Aaron, just a couple of, several decades, basically. And the people who are now running the country, a lot of them actually were meeting illegally in basements and even served time in jail, and now they're running the country. That is how fresh and young Taiwan's democracy is, and Pelosi made it clear with her statement that she absolutely wants to protect that. China, of course, they've never recognized the government here, and they say that eventually they're going to take this place back. These military exercises clearly an attempt to intimidate and to send a message that when China is ready, Taiwan will become a part of the mainland no matter what.
Well, Ripley, thank you very much from Taipei. And you heard Will laying out here just over the next, it's 7:07 here. So the speaker will be coming out of her hotel, meeting with members of parliament in Taiwan. And then by 10:30 tonight Eastern time, 10:30 a.m. in Taipei, meeting with the president of Taiwan. These are going to be a very tense and important few hours. So for more, I want to talk to retired Vice Admiral Robert Moret, former director of naval intelligence, who spent years stationed in the Asia-Pacific region, along with Abby Phillip, here with me, anchor of Inside Politics Sunday. So, Admiral, what Will was just laying out, 21 warplanes from China into Taiwan's air defense zone. You heard Will saying, if you stand on the coast, you might even be able to hear these military exercises, some of them with live fire around Taiwan. The ambassador from the U.S. has been summoned to China by the Chinese counterpart. There's been cyber attacks. So here we are in these next few hours. Will this escalate further as Pelosi goes through these crucial meetings?
Yeah, Aaron, great question. And first, thanks for the opportunity to be able to join you and the others this evening. I would hope not. I would hope this would be a measured response by China, which we expected based on Speaker Pelosi's visit, but that, cool heads would prevail on their side and that there would be some exercise activity that will probably take place for the next few days or so, and perhaps the cyber intrusions that you mentioned already, but that it would be limited in scope and a measured response to what is happening there, largely for domestic consumption, because I don't think we want to underestimate the extent to which so much of this is for the Chinese public, and especially the senior government officials, because of the party Congress that President Xi has coming up this fall.
Right. And of course, the images of the fighter jets and the live fire, I mean, that is what they're playing again and again on state television. Abby, before Pelosi went, President Biden publicly said the U.S. military did not think her visit was a good idea. He said the U.S. military didn't think that, didn't talk about his own point of view. But the administration, you've been reporting behind the scenes, tried to convince her not to go. And yet, what we understand is U.S. officials think that the Chinese officials don't necessarily see the distinction between Pelosi and Biden, that they view this as an official state visit. Why didn't Biden tell her not to go?
I mean, from the Chinese perspective, Pelosi and Biden are in the same political party, that they are allied politically. But on top of that, she is in the presidential line of succession, which is why, by the way, her visit to Taiwan requires a robust military reinforcement on the ground. But from Biden's perspective, there are two factors, domestic and international. On the domestic front, Republicans have been attacking Biden as being soft on China. And Biden himself personally wants to be tough on China, is tough on China. He believes the United States needs to be oriented more with China as a strategic adversary. So his own personal view of this is to push back on China, but that is in conflict with what is going on the international stage, in which the Biden administration believes it's imperative to take down the rhetoric and take down the antagonism between the two parties, but he cannot be seen as just letting the Chinese Communist Party determine what the Speaker of the House does on an international visit. That's how the Biden administration
And she made it clear by making it public that she was going to go, right? That she kind of took any cards out of his hand.
And it would have been leaked. Private conversations would have been leaked, and it would have been made public.
Right. And then possibly looking weak. So, Admiral, China's Ministry of Defense says that Pelosi, and their quote is, knowingly and maliciously provoked and created a crisis between the U.S. and China. I just wanted to zone in on this because words matter so much when it comes to these things. That use of the word crisis. Is this now a crisis, Admiral?
Aaron, I'd like to think it's not. And importantly, as you say, they came from the Minister of Defense, not the Foreign Minister or President Xi. Those are the kind of things you would expect to have come from a defense minister, which are different in character from what you might hear from somebody else in government.
Yeah.
And as I said, I'm hopeful that this won't be viewed as a crisis, but that will, settle down here in short order, hopefully within the next couple of days. As importantly, Speaker Pelosi and her delegation go on to other countries that are good friends of ours in East Asia.
Right, and of course, I would imagine they're going to do these meetings and then leave. Abby, the White House concerns, and it's interesting, and and some of the Democratic criticism of this trip has come in stark contrast to the Republicans. 22 Senate Republicans issued a statement saying they're fully behind Pelosi's visit, fully committed to Taiwan. Here is one of them.
I'm about to use 4 words in a row that I haven't used in this way before, and those 4 words are: Speaker Pelosi was right.
All right, no doubt many of them completely believe what they're saying. They do. They're glad she's going. This is true. But they're also, putting out a letter and all of that. There's clearly a political gamesmanship going on here.
It helps from their perspective that Pelosi is apparently, sort of pushing back on Biden. That helps.
The thumbing her nose at Biden.
Thumbing her nose at Biden is something that Republicans are very supportive of. But let's be honest here. The Republican position of they are tough on China, Democrats are not, is a largely political construction. The Trump administration, Trump personally, was very friendly toward Xi Jinping as president. His administration maybe had tougher rhetoric, but Trump himself, he loved when Xi Jinping rolled out the red carpet for him on his visit to China during his administration. So a lot of this is just political posturing ahead of a midterm election. Republicans want to draw a contrast between themselves and Democrats. But as you can see here, Pelosi has a long history of supporting Taiwan. So this is not new, and it's also not about pushing back on President Biden.
Right, yeah, and certainly something she has had a long track record on. Admiral, Abby, thank you both very much. And stay with us, because as I just mentioned, it is now about 7:15 a.m. in Taiwan, and we are standing by for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to emerge from her hotel to meet with top officials there and the president of Taiwan. And when that happens, we are going to bring it to you live. Out front next, the State Department warning Americans across the globe to be on the lookout after the U.S. tracked and killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahri. Plus, it's election night in America, and 3 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump tonight are facing off against Republican challengers. Our John King is standing by at the wall with what he's looking for, and wiped. CNN is learning that more January 6th messages were erased, this time from the phones of key top Trump Pentagon officials.
released last year the very first motorcycle with radar. And what that's allowed us to do is to be able to put some technology in the motorcycle that gives features of safety for the rider, including blind spot indicators that's been used on cars for years. So we're not only dedicated to that performance, but also to try and improve our environmental impact and also the safety for the riders themselves.
Have you heard it like this?
Let's untangle the players and political forces.
Fast-paced news from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
From the empty airports of 2020 to the teeming terminals of 2022. This year's summer rush in Europe has been so big, airlines are struggling to keep up. The International Air Transport Association says passenger revenues in Europe will double this year, despite the war in Ukraine. Only Asia and the Middle East are growing faster. For Europe's biggest carriers, it's a moment of opportunity.
After 2 years of being grounded, one way or another, including physically being grounded myself to a certain degree, I think I'm sharing the upbeat mood you feel around this conference. And again, people want to fly again, people want to connect again.
Here at IATA's annual general meeting in Qatar, there's been caution, there's also been some optimism. As far as the COVID recovery goes, the journey isn't over for Europe's airlines.
Konnichiwa, Masa.
Meet the leaders of business, sport, technology, culture, science. The world is adapting, creating, innovating.
It's an opportunity for us to evolve forward.
It's an extraordinary playground to invent, experiment.
From every corner of the world.
Right here in Japan.
We call ourselves farmers and futurists.
Learn how to build a better future.
By protecting the giant panda, you're protecting the ecosystems for potentially millions of other species.
Discover new places to explore.
When I woke up today, the only thing I could think about was dancing.
I'm just revealing the story that nature is telling us.
It is as cool as it sounds, I promise.
Tonight, the State Department with a warning for Americans following the killing of al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahri, saying al-Qaeda supporters could carry out attacks targeting U.S. citizens and facilities around the world. And it comes as we are seeing for the first time the house in Kabul where a drone strike took out al-Zawahri, who was referred to as bin Laden's brains by some. He was one of the masterminds of the 9/11 attacks. And Nick Payton-Walsh is out front.
The target was the same as it was at the start of the war on terror. 9/11 mastermind turned al-Qaeda's 71-year-old leader. But the method startlingly precise. 2 missiles hitting Kabul's fanciest streets. The al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahri, stepping onto a balcony that had likely for years housed rich Westerners working for NATO, but stepping out onto it dawn Sunday for the last time.
I authorized a precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all.
The Biden administration, so confident they got the right guy, they built a model of the house. They said they didn't need boots on the ground before the strike or after.
We do not have DNA confirmation. We're not going to get that confirmation. And quite frankly, based on the multiple sources and methods that we have gathered the information from, we don't need it.
It was a staggering counter-terrorism success, born of a failure the US had tried to gloss over. As the US rushed to leave Afghanistan, at the end losing control at the close of its longest war, it had tried to suggest al-Qaeda were degraded, no longer a threat there. But in truth, the group were finding a safe haven there again, with concerns last year they might have been able to strike the West again as early as next year. They weren't the threat they were when Zawahri masterminded savagery at the US Embassy in Nairobi or on the USS Cole. And their brutal star had been eclipsed by the mayhem of ISIS. But their franchises had spread across the world, often encouraging locals to target other locals, and Zawahiri remained their figurehead with his hands on some buttons. Analysts felt his recent messages suggested a man more at ease, even complacent. US officials saying they had followed family members to get him. His most likely successor, Saif al-Adil, recently in Iran, according to the UN. One former Afghan official telling me he may have recently left for Afghanistan. But terror leaders last less long these days. Still, the enduring, harder questions are for the Taliban. Few believed they had truly renounced terror like they promised the US. But after 20 years of war, they still brought exactly the same al-Qaeda figures back into the safest of their havens, central Kabul. Yet found the United States also had a long memory and now didn't even need to be there to kill their most wanted.
It's amazing when you talk about the safe house, right? And it certainly suggests, I mean, it's in Kabul and it's in a wealthy area of Kabul, ties between al-Qaeda and the Taliban. How else could he have been there? It certainly suggests a link.
There is no way that he could have, of his profile, been living the kind of life he did on a balcony, chilling out in an area like that, without at least some high-ranking Taliban knowing he was there. We don't know which part. It's a huge institution, the Taliban, but the Haqqanis have always been accused of having al-Qaeda links, and the houses in that particular area, I understand, are thought to be close to that Haqqani network. So it is a remarkable sign of quite how quickly the Taliban went back to embracing just the same people that the United States invaded Afghanistan to go after.
Right. And then, of course, they promised in a deal with the Trump administration to not embrace, immediately going the other way.
We believe that, man, but yeah.
Now, you mentioned Saif al-Adil, who may be the successor and may have gone back to Afghanistan. What more do you know about him?
Well, look, I mean, it's a hot-button issue, frankly, for the Iranians, because the UN thought that Saif al-Adil was in Iran. I've heard from one former Afghan official who knows this field pretty well that they think that he may actually have crossed into Afghanistan recently. And that removes a headache for the Iranians, because they wouldn't now technically be harbouring the guy who might be the new leader of al-Qaeda. But it puts him possibly in play in Afghanistan too. The suggestions he may not be in Kabul, but there are also suggestions too that there have been not just AlZawahri in terms of top leaders in Afghanistan, others too, and that may have been a sign that something was afoot. But you've got to remember, these are a significantly degraded organisation than they were 20 years ago. It's a very, very different anti-terrorism fight now.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. And next, voters casting ballots tonight in 5 states, one of them Arizona, where Trump and Pence-backed candidates are squaring off. John King is next. Plus, more missing January 6th text messages from top Trump officials. Finding out about more. Cell phones wiped right after Jan 6th. What's going on?
Africa Avant-Garde in association with Access Bank. More than banking.
I'm sorry you had to put up with your father's BS all your life.
I've had an investor tell me, I can't finance your film because your lead is black. And that is even African American. Now you're talking about Africa. Just by saying Africa, the doors are shut. No one is interested because no one thinks you're capable.
You like?
Oh, Zumkita, it is a definite yes.
So when I started in the industry 10 years ago, I think the hard part of it was really coming into a very male-dominated industry. But I think it's changing a lot more. I think there was a recognition also from funding bodies that that was happening, and a lot of interventions were made to kind of change that.
For World Sport, I'm Amanda Davis, and this is CNN.
I would describe One World as compelling, inclusive, and original. I want this show to be a place where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, tonight on CNN.
When you think of Africa, you think of a lion. There's no feeling more primal than walking in the bush, knowing there are lions around. It's almost like a rewilding of the self. One of the central principles of rewilding is actually to manage an ecosystem less. It's to give nature back to nature, give nature back to itself. It's not just about bringing back a species that existed maybe 300 or 400 years ago. Rewilding is also about bringing back the ecosystem. It's a key role, really, that they play in controlling herbivore numbers, in enabling the felt itself and the redgrass, very palatable grasses, to actually regenerate themselves as well. So we need to take a step back and sort of realize that we're a part of nature rather than apart from it.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Tonight, polls closing soon in key primary races across 5 states. All eyes on Arizona, where the race for governor has become a proxy war between former President Donald Trump and his former Vice President Mike Pence. That race pits Trump-backed Kari Lake against Karen Taylor Robson, who Pence endorsed. Kyung La is out front. She is in Scottsdale tonight. You've been covering this race all the way through, Kyung, and you've been talking to a lot of voters there today on primary day. What have you learned?
Well, it's just about 2.5 hours left of voting here, and we've been speaking to a good bit of the Republicans who've been coming to this particular polling place. And what they've been telling us is that even though the election lie and Trump's endorsement has really run through and coursed through so many of these races here on the Republican side of the Arizona primary, that the reason why they're coming are other reasons. Sure, it may have bumped them one way or the other, but they're driven by issues like the border as well as cultural issues and the economy. Take a listen.
The left has gone kind of mad, in my opinion, and it just seems like it seems a little unfixable. It seems more scary now than it's ever seemed. So now I'm leaning more towards my conservative leanings that I've always had, but I'm losing hope in the left.
So what Republicans are hoping for, though, at least the Trump-backed ones, is that what's also resonating and what will resonate is the Trump endorsement. Donald Trump has endorsed a slate of candidates, from governor to the U.S. Senate race to Attorney General, as well as Secretary of State. And some of those candidates, like Kari Lake, who is running for governor, Aaron, has fully embraced that lie that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. But as you heard from that voter, they may not necessarily be paying attention to all of that noise, but looking more at the issues that they feel affect their personal lives. Aaron?
Right. Thank you very much, Kyung. Of course, the question is whether it really is now only noise or still something much more. John King is out front now, live from the Magic Wall, of course. So, John, where Kyung is talking about, and she's in Scottsdale, the Arizona governor race is such a crucial test of the power of the lie, right? As she talks about it, right? You've got one candidate who explicitly is 100% behind it. What are you focused on tonight in Arizona?
Well, I think the point you just make, the depth, the breadth of the cancer in the Republican bloodstream, candidates running freely on the big lie, denying the election, Kari Lake channeling Trump, saying if she loses tonight, it's because there's cheating. That is a cancer in American politics, no matter which party it is. It's a cancer in American politics. So can Kari Lake win this nomination, or will the establishment candidate, Karen Taylor Robson, win? This is Trump versus Pence. This is Trump versus the establishment. So you have the big dynamics at play there. What do you look for? Where Kyung just was in Scottsdale, that's Maricopa County, right here, Phoenix area and the suburbs around it. You move right to the south, Tucson and the suburbs around it, that's Pima County. That's 75% of the statewide population in those 2 counties, Aaron. So the question is, do suburban Republicans decide it's time to break from Donald Trump and his big lie, or do suburban Republicans in the state of Arizona, battleground this year, battleground the next presidential, battleground into the future, do they decide to stick with Donald Trump, or do they decide to say, no, we've had enough?
Yeah. All right. So obviously Maricopa, Pima counties, and obviously those are a couple hours here away from polls closing. But in Missouri, we're gonna know much earlier, and results are going to start to come in very shortly. We're watching the Senate GOP primary. Trump promised that last-minute endorsement and then released a statement saying that he's proud to announce Eric has my complete and total endorsement. Turns out 2 of the top 3 candidates are named Eric. One of them, Eric Greitens, right, who resigned as governor, abuse accusations from his ex-wife. He's denied them, that among other things in his history here. Even Trump loyalist Senator Josh Hawley, John, of course, has tried to get him to drop out. So what stands out in Missouri?
Well, number one, you have this crowded Republican primary. There's no votes in yet, so the candidates are listed in alphabetical order. Eric Greitens, the former governor who resigned in disgrace, is first. You see the Eric Schmidt. He's the attorney general. Both of them to varying degrees also support the big lie. So either of the Erics are on Team Trump, if you will, in terms of supporting the big lie. What stands out here, Aaron, is that we're talking about it. This is 2022, a Democratic president's first midterm year, a Republican retiring, Roy Blunt retiring in Missouri. We should not be talking about the Missouri Senate race. This should be a solid Republican seat. But in a 50-50 Senate, in a very tough year for Democrats, Democrats do believe that it's possible that if Eric Greitens wins this nomination tonight, the Democrats have a shot at this seat. That would be a gift. If the Democrats have a shot at Missouri in this midterm election year, that would be a gift.
Yeah, I mean, right. And as you point out, not something we should be talking about. But yet, when you're testing this litmus test of, as you put it, how much cancer is in the bloodstream, we are. All right, John King, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we await those polls closing in just under about a half an hour in most of Missouri. Out front next, January 6th text messages of key Trump Pentagon officials wiped. More? This obviously in addition to the messages lost from the Secret Service. Is it a coincidence? And at least 37 dead as flooding continues to ravage Kentucky. We're on the ground again tonight.
I'm Max Foster in London, and this is CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum.
Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine.
This
is
CNN.
Tonight, we are now learning that January 6th text messages were wiped from the phones of key Trump Pentagon officials. This news comes from court filings after a watchdog group requested texts from former Acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller, former Chief of Staff Kash Patel, and former Secretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy. The three are considered key witnesses to understanding the Trump administration's response to the insurrection. Now, there is no suggestion that the officials in these cases themselves erased the messages. But of course, context is impossible to ignore here, right? It comes as the Department of Homeland Security is under fire for the apparent loss of messages from the Secret Service on that same day. Out front now, Lawrence Tribe, constitutional law professor at Harvard. House Democrats consulted with him on their first Trump impeachment over Russia. And Ty Cobb, he was Trump's White House lawyer in the Mueller Russia investigation. Two who know more about this than anyone. So, Professor Tribe, let me start with you on this reporting about messages wiped from key Department of Defense officials' phones from January 6th. Is it possible that this is a random coincidence?
No. I mean, I suppose anything is possible. It's possible that all the air will get sucked out of the room. But when you look at what happened with the Secret Service and with the Department of Homeland Security, and now with the Department of Defense, with key officials appointed by Donald Trump, it looks like it's clearly a plot to destroy information that is necessary for an ongoing inquiry. That is a serious federal crime under 18 U.S. Code section 1519. It's punishable by 20 years in prison. So the people who did it, and I don't claim to know exactly who they were, can all be flipped to point to who got them to do it. And there's only one person, I think we all know his name, who is at the intersection of all of these agencies and who would stand to gain by covering up evidence of the attempt to overturn a democratic election.
So
that's Donald Trump.
And are you suggesting that he would have directed them to actually wipe this, or he would have directed them to get rid of them? I'm using the word them because we don't know who, to erase any conversations that were had with Pentagon officials, basically?
Well, the way mob bosses do it, there's a wink and a nod. Remember when he said, Russia, if you're listening, maybe you could find the 30,000 missing emails. Now he may be saying, Russia or somebody else, if you're listening, maybe you can help erase 30,000 texts. It's pretty obvious, and you don't have to have his fingerprints directly on the orders. That's not the way these guys work. So I think the Justice Department clearly has to go after this entire plot. And I believe Merrick Garland is smart enough to do that.
Ty, where do you stand on this reporting and again, this idea of coincidence?
You know, I think we started out with a little crack in the ground, and now we've got an abyss like the Grand Canyon. I don't think we have enough information to make any conclusions. Keep in mind, the evidence is that the Defense Department and its secretary and General Milley and others, including Kash Patel, were hardly on good terms with the president and hardly favored any of his actions pre and post January 6th. So it's a little bit early, I think, in the information gathering realm to jump to the conclusion that people are going to jail for 20 years. I do agree 100% with the professor that this has to be investigated. You can't ignore context, as you indicated, and he mentioned Homeland Security, and I think that you have to reconcile those things. I will say those are two completely different types of record keeping, those systems. So I'm not sure you can link them, but you can't ignore the fact that, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
So Professor Tribe, all of this, you mentioned, you put, the former president at the center of it. And that is the big question that all roads lead to. So having both of you here with your experience and expertise, the question is whether former President Trump will be charged with a crime. Now, Professor Tribe, let me start with you here. You see two criminal charges for sure, and maybe four, right?
Well, I've almost lost count. I mean, there is the crime of conspiring to defraud the United States.
Yep.
There is the crime of pressuring officials to violate their duty. There is the crime of corruptly impeding an official proceeding. There is the crime of assisting an insurrection. There is the crime of conspiring to overturn a fair election and to overturn the government. There is the crime of seditious conspiracy. Each of them is backed up by considerable evidence. How many federal crimes do you need before we have to really move quickly, because the clock is ticking?
Professor Tribe, though, do you believe, and this is crucial because I want to get here, I know that Ty agrees with you on part of this, but not on all. Aiding and abetting an insurrection and seditious conspiracy, these charges, do they have enough? Have they proved that to a criminal degree and to put those on the former president? Professor Tribe.
I think the odds are that the evidence is there. We've seen a good bit of it, but it's only the tip of the iceberg that we've seen. We've heard Cassidy Hutchinson. We've seen lots of the evidence. We've heard lots of the president's phone calls. We've heard evidence about what those phone calls were, trying to get Clark to turn the Department of Justice to do the president's bidding.
Yeah.
We know that there was a phone call to Raffensperger to get him to, quote, find, unquote, 11,780 votes. When you add it all up, since we don't know what we don't know, that is, we don't know all the remaining evidence, I can't say that the day after tomorrow there is enough to indict, but I can say that the trajectory is clear, that the odds that there should not be an indictment before the end of the year, an indictment that can then have a superseding indictment, are vanishingly low.
So, Ty, would you agree with that? And where do you see the charges right now that they have them? And Ty, and I'm very, very curious because I think people are very focused on the aiding and abetting an insurrection, seditious conspiracy charges. Would you go as far as Professor Tribe on that?
No, but I am with him. I think that so. As a former line prosecutor and chief of a criminal division in a U.S. Attorney's Office, there are multiple approaches to indictments. Some people want to charge multiple counts. Some people want to be efficient and let the facts easily solve the elements of a crime. I think the non-reckless way to charge this on the apparent evidence is the conspiracy count, which I favor because it would bring in others culpable, and it also would leverage the ability of the Justice Department to impress upon others the importance of cooperating in some fashion to get their truthful testimony. I think the conspiracy to defraud the United States is there in many pieces. I think picking the pieces that best fall together is a chore that the Justice Department is more than capable of. I also agree on the obstruction of an official proceeding, obstruct, influence, or impede an official proceeding. I think those charges appear quite significant in terms of the evidence. I think the conversation that the professor just referred to with Raffensperger is highly probative. I think the fake elector efforts, particularly in Arizona and in Georgia, are highly problematic. Yeah. I think the pressure on Pence is highly problematic, and the entire back and forth between Jeffrey Clark and the request that Trump made of Acting Attorney General Rosen and his deputy.
So Will, the question is, of course, both of you laying this out, and I just want to emphasize to everybody in the Venn diagram of how much you agree on, right? And I think that's significant if people, perceive, lawyers could have varying different views on this. Professor Tribe, though, it's Merrick Garland who's going to make the decision, the Attorney General, on whether to do this. And you've known him for many years. He understands what a crucial decision this is, right? It's a legal decision. It's also a decision that will impact the whole country. Will he do it, Professor Tribe?
Well, before I try to guess whether he will do it, I want to say that it's very notable that Ty Cobb and I agree on so much, because after
Yes.
all, he was Trump's defense lawyer. It's also notable that we've agreed that there are serious crimes, even without the fact that Donald Trump sat there while the mob that he knew to be armed was aimed at the Capitol, egged it on by calling his vice president a coward. Now, as to what Merrick Garland will do, although I've known him for 50 years, I know him to be a serious, thoughtful person. I don't pretend to read his mind, but I would be amazed if he was deliberately misleading the nation when he answered that interview the other day by saying he would follow the evidence where it led. He would not allow politics to make a difference. He would not allow the fact that we're in a political season to make a difference.
Right.
All of that means that he's basically telling the American people that if the evidence shows that Trump is almost certainly guilty, he will go after him. That is what the evidence shows. And I don't think he was being cute. I don't think he was winking and nodding the way Donald Trump might have been doing when he got people to do his bidding.
And yet, Ty, the stakes are so incredibly high that if he were to go ahead with a charge, he needs to know he can win. And this is where Trump's defense comes in. Will Trump's defense that he believed the election was stolen, which is what he keeps saying, sort of, well, you can't blame me because I believed it. I thought it was true. Will that defense work, Ty?
I don't believe so. I think the evidence, assuming the evidence which has been presented, of course, without cross-examination or challenge, but assuming that the evidence is as presented, there's considerable evidence out there that his own legal advisors, including Eastman on January 4th, acknowledged that it was they were acting on a frivolous legal theory. I think that's very damaging to somebody who wants to argue willful blindness. I also think that while Trump may argue that defense, I think he's more likely to use the trial in an effort to, deal with his themes. That he's all powerful. He got cheated, and he's the only one standing up for the country. If I could make one point, though, Aaron, in response to something the professor said, which I think is significant, is the fact that the professor pointed to with the Pence tweet during the almost 3 hours of Trump's inactivity fits very, very perfectly into what I think should be done. I think Congress has a lane here. I don't think that lane is telling Merrick Garland what to do or pretending that they're leading him anywhere. Merrick's case has been moving along at a pace, just because they don't have a press release every day and they have grand jury restraints and lawful restraints on what they're able to share, doesn't mean they haven't been long at it. And obviously they've prosecuted people who actually went into the Capitol en masse. But the Pence tweet, coupled with the 3 hours of inaction, in my view, easily fits into the definition of giving aid and comfort to the insurrectionists. And that is a standard under Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, which Congress has at its disposal. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why, instead of telling the Justice Department what to do, that they aren't acting on that alone. Because if they have a sense of the Congress, the penalty of finding Trump guilty of giving aid and comfort to an insurrectionist is disqualification from office forever.
And that, of course, would obviously be very significant, as he has made it clear, at least as of now, that he intends to run again. Professor Ty Cobb, thank you both very much for such a thoughtful conversation. And next, first, there was catastrophic flooding, and now the areas hit hardest in Kentucky are grappling with extreme heat. And the Biden administration finally sanctioning Putin's rumored girlfriend, mother of multiple of his children, Alina Kabaeva. This after months of hesitation as the U.S. feared escalating conflict with Russia. So what changed?
We've been building avatars since 2016, so I would say we haven't been chasing a moment. We've been building for this moment for quite some time. and really studying, I think, the younger demographic and really where they're trending towards, which is really trying to express an authentic version of themselves. So, I've always felt comfortable behind a keyboard, right? So if I was in school, when I was growing up in middle school or in high school, I would be kind of nervous to maybe talk to a girl, or I'd be kind of nervous to go, show off in front of friends or communicate with friends or whatever. But as soon as I got home and I got into AIM and I got behind my username, I became the most outgoing and gregarious character that there was. You're able to create this manifestation of yourself in this very fantastical art form. So we hope that avatars can be that safe haven that allow you to express yourself from every different segment of your imagination and serve as your emotional surrogate.
When you're on a motorcycle, you're experiencing the world in such a different way. When you hit the open road and there's nothing but kind of the sunset that you're chasing, it really does give you a sense of what it means to be alive. My name is Lauren Trantham, and I'm the founder and executive director of Ride My Road. Ride My Road is a fundraising organization. We primarily operate within the motorcycle community to raise funds and awareness around the topics of human trafficking in the United States. In 2016, I was going through a divorce, and it was a really tough time for me. And so I decided to jump on my motorcycle and take my camera. I did 10,000 miles across America. I photographed 40 survivors. That was really how I began this journey, was more as a personal project as a photographer, with just this idea, this thought that can we heal a broken heart through helping others? Survivors are literally the best among us. They have persevered and have so much resilience, and we have so much to learn from them. We look at vulnerable people and think that maybe they're just cast aside or they're not important, but I think really we need to look to them if we want to move forward on issues like human trafficking.
We share this place, we all belong.
Transformation, technology, new Marketplace Europe.
From a meteoric leap of 5G to a deep dive into the metaverse, how Europe is investing in its telecom sector.
Marketplace Europe, Saturday on CNN.
Tonight, no relief for flood-ravaged Kentucky as flooded areas now are under a heat advisory. The governor is saying the official death toll remains at 37, but will certainly rise. Evan McMorris Santoro is out front.